Morning. I'm honored to be here. Thanks to Øredev. This is how you pronounce it. Øredev. I got it. So yeah, I'm Devlin Duldulao. I'm currently living and working in Oslo, Norway, for 3.5 years now. Originally from Manila, Philippines, and now I'm Thanks to Øredev for having me here, sharing you what I know about Remix, Next.js, React, and the whole about the ecosystem of React. So today I'll be talking about Remix and agenda. I don't have agenda. I will just show you a little bit of slides, theories, what's inside Remix, and compare it also with Next.js, right? And then after those, boring slides, not boring, after those slides, I'm gonna pull out my VS Code or my IDE to show you codes in Remix and differentiate it with Next.js and how to run it on the web and what's the difference again uh, with this new meta framework. So yeah, to start, so knives, yeah, in the developer community, it is common to see new JavaScript frameworks and tools appear every month, right? Every month. Some of them offer different approach to solving scenarios that are currently being solved with other tools. And yeah, others bring a new concept or idea, proposing a different way to face, let's say, a project problem. And as a chef, or if you're a chef, chef has types of knives to cut through different foods. And developers also have many different available frameworks and libraries that are good and fit for different use cases. And let's talk about Remix, the new meta framework to create JavaScript project using server-side rendering. And let's go through its main features and concepts and see the similarities and differences, right, with another popular JavaScript framework, Next.js. So here, like other frameworks, well, this is just a screenshot of code, but I'm going to show you an IDE later. So like other frameworks, Remix allows developers to manage different routes of their web projects using JavaScript, TypeScript files that contain handler functions. We're able to generate routes in our website, creating files that follow file system hierarchy of our projects and creating analog URLs for our project. So yeah, and as you can see here, it's using $sign. So that's how you create dynamic routes. Let's skip this and move to another one and show you more in the IDE. So Remix routes work using the partial routing feature provided by React Router. And you can see it here if you create a boilerplate of Remix and look into the node modules, it's included right from the start. So with this approach in mind, we can highlight the following benefits, right? Because in React, we normally use React Router. So nested components. So Remix gives you the possibility of managing nested pages and components. So we can create a file to handle certain route and at the same level in the file system, a folder with the same name, and all the files that we create inside that folder will be nested components of the parent route instead of different pages. In Remix, there's this error handling. So nested components bring another benefit. If an error occurs while rendering a certain component, it doesn't affect the other nested parts of the page. So we can encapsulate the error just in this section here. And this is how you can also replace the default error boundary. So yeah, and instead of getting a general page error, we can just put this error message inside that component, and you can see more later. Forms. So as Remix focuses on web standards, It uses native methods, post, put, delete, patch, to handle forms instead of using JavaScript, where we're used to when using Create React App or other JavaScript framework. So you'll be have to use this form with this capital letter form, where you can also use the small letter form. But this part here is what makes it different from other JavaScript framework or React framework. You'll not be using JavaScript. You'll not be using or passing function inside this on click. You'll be using form, and I'll be showing you how to mutate or get, and not to think of this optimistic update in Remix, because it's all working out of the box, and you'll see more later. Loaders and actions. This is very important in Remix. They provide two different types of functions to create server-side dynamic content. The loader functions are used to handle get, HTTP requests in the server, mainly used to get data from different sources. It's up to you. And then the action functions, this one. So we're using TypeScript here, so you can see we're having types. The action functions monitor post, put, delete, and patch requests. It focus on data manipulation and modification. So these are two main things that you will see in a Remix framework: loader, an action, and has to be exported. And this can be anything here. This is an ORM, or it can be another API calls. What else is inside Remix? No more loading spinners. You don't have to do that. Remix handles it for you. For example, in SPA, means that you have to wait for server to load the data, and in the meantime, you need to notify your users by giving them loader spinner. With SSR, of course, you get the full interactive page. In Remix also, let's say integrations, working with databases has never been easier with Prisma plus SQLite for development. Supabase also, it's a one choice for Remix, but you can use any database. But they have this easy to port integration with this Prisma. Remix stack. So what is this Remix stacks? It's just a CLI that allows you to generate these Remix projects. So with post, with to-do or whatever, and ready with Docker file. So this gives you like an overview and how to do this best practice in Remix. You can definitely create a Remix application just by installing npm and then doing it yourself. But I would highly recommend using this Remix stacks because it's already there and you just have to follow the convention. So that's in Remix. So what are the differences between Remix and Next.js? React-based, so Remix community members have been working on different implementations using other frameworks like Vue.js, Angular, and Svelte. But in Next.js, it depends on React, and there's no plan to change this at the moment. Server-side rendering, so both Remix and Next.js offer server-side or SSR to generate the markup and content of our pages from the web server before sending it to the client. SSG, when you say SSG, is static site generation. So Next offers the possibility of pre-generating static pages and content at build time, right? Using SSG, while Remix doesn't. So there's no SSG in Remix. It's just SSR. So another one, stale while revalidate. So to serve content as fast as possible, Remix relies on the stale while revalidate caching directive, or SWR. And Next.js also offers the possibility of working with stale while revalidate, but inside the get server side props function. Edge native, or CDN. So both of them are ready. You can deploy your application in different servers across regions, different regions around the world, and your users, they don't have to hit the origin server. They have this already at CDN, right? So they're both edge native. Server-side code, and again, Remix uses forms, Next.js JavaScript, and you'll see later when I disable the JavaScript in my browser, I can still do CRUD in my application because I'm not using JavaScript. Next.js, create React app, uses JavaScript, right? Unhandled errors. So let's see unhandled errors between Next.js and Remix. So Next.js, unhandled errors. Click, 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 click. So that's Next.js. Nothing happens. And this is a default user experience, right? What about in Remix? Remix handles every error around data and rendering in your app, even errors on the server. So that's also a default behavior of Remix. You have the error boundary that I'm talking about earlier. What about interruptions? So interruptions, Next.js doesn't manage race conditions, interruptions or revalidation. So the UI is now, possibly out of sync with the server if you click too much. While Remix, you can see Remix cancels the request on interruptions and revalidates the data after this post completes. So this is very powerful, by the way. This ensures the UI across the entire page, not just this form. It always sync with whatever changes your form just made with the server. So again, the CLI. Let's quickly finish this and go to the demo. So there are templates here. I'll describe what these are. So Blues stack deploys to Fly. It has authentication. Cypress. It has also Tailwind support. Out of the box supports Postgres and has local database running in Docker there. In the stack is very similar to Blues. Instead of Postgres, it uses SQLite and no Docker. And then Grunge use DynamoDB as the persistence layer, and it deploys to AWS. So after that, you can choose TypeScript or JavaScript, right? And then there you go. You have this boilerplate. And now maybe I can do some demo here. So this is what you'll get in that boilerplate that you will be creating using the CLI. And we can start with package.json. But I added something here, Axios. I added Axios here. And I'll be using Prisma. So in Prisma, you need to initialize Prisma. SQLite will be the database. And then also open up Prisma, which is I already did. I also have JSON server here, just to give you an example of how well I can how to send HTTP requests, blah blah blah. React DOM, Toastify, so Remix utils, and some types here. So nothing special. Let's see the app. Or let's see here. The demo would be, as you can see, so I'll be showing you. I put it here in order, so it will be like a very easy to comprehend. So I'll be showing you root.tsx first with links function, meta function. What are those? Error boundary, catch boundary, and then after that, navigations and routes. And then after I'm showing that, VLanes, a VLanes link or page. It will be just REST API only. Pokemon page that I have here in my app with Axios in the client code and use state, and then another version of Pokemon here with Axios in the server code, And then with the use loader data, so these two Pokemon is hitting a Pokemon API, by the way, public API. And I have here heroes with filter, navlink, and URL parameters, and then to-dos will be the last because it's about, I wouldn't say complicated, but as a React developer, I'm not used to, using forms when mutating my data. It's like the old ways in PHP, right? So I'm putting it in the end with an ORM. So let's go back here. So yes, Remix can just return you this, a JSON response. And how do you do that? We can move here, but first, again, root. Sorry, mirror on the wall. There you go. So here you go. Let's go to app, root. What's inside this root? First is from the remix run node. So we have this links function and meta function. Meta is just like adding for SEO purposes. And links function is when you want to add CSS link or another JavaScript link. Let me show it to you. So this is how you'd use it. Adding additional. So this is annoying. This when hovering. Okay, I'm just going to avoid hovering to something. Okay, so links function defines which link elements to add to the page when the user visits a route. And you can see here, global style URL, styles URL. I'm adding it here or registering it here in this links function. Another one would be the CSS of this React Toastify, adding it here. And another one here, meta export for meta tags of your HTML document. Title, viewport, and you can also make this dynamic for every page. And the app component, which is the root, is just document layout, which is what you will see here. And then outlet, just like the React router, right? You have this outlet, which technically just revolve in different components. So what about this document? This, by the way, it's the default of this boilerplate that I use. Document. So it uses this children React node as a parameter. And then you have this arrangement of HTML, head, meta, and there you have your meta function and links function, body. So this is it. For the layout, anything that you want to have this default layout in your application. Navigation, of course, it stays there. And your children will be just another component which, act like a page. Error boundary. So this is it. So look at here, error boundary also needs this styling, right? So you have this document and layout also included in this error boundary, and you can just replace it. And the error message will be what type of error you're getting from your application. So you just have to pass it, error.message, and then you can see what is the error. And the difference between error boundary and catch boundary is that catch boundary, we use that for checking status code or status error. For example, 401, right? Like you tried visit page that you do not have access to, 404, and then default just throw cut data and then returning it. So yeah, that's the difference between catch boundary in Remix and error boundary. So next would be navigation and routes. So I think I have to show you. For the navigation, so we have this directory routes here, and typical file-based route system. You just drop here any files, but if you have this dynamic route, create a directory, create an index file, and then use this dollar sign as, for example, your dynamic route, dollar sign, here ID, etc. Right? And next would be for the app that I showed you earlier, VLanes. So Remix can just send you a JSON response. How to do that? Let's go here, routes, VLanes, and it's very simple here. I just hard-coded this data here, but normally it will be just loader, export again, and then use this JSON from Remix run node, return JSON, and pass the array. So you can have this ORM here, right? Or another API if you want to make this like a with this BFF, design pattern or back end for front end. Yeah. Or something like that, and then pass it here in your JSON. So that's very simple. Return JSON, right? Next would be for this Pokemon. So, returning this Pokemon here, there will be another Pokemon. But the difference is, you can look at here, is this Pokemon version 1 here re-renders, and you can tell that there's like flash that disappears. So what's the difference between the two? Let's check it out. So in Pokemon version 1, I'm using this old way of how we fetch data using, let's say, create React app, right? I'll be using useEffect. I have this use state, Pokemon, set Pokemon. And then console, you can see that this is happening inside the browser. When I check the console log here, you can see client, it's happening in the browser. Get is just an abstraction from Axios, getting this set Pokemon, and then you can see that it's being rendered here. The problem in here is if you disable your JavaScript, it won't work anymore because it's using JavaScript. Whereas in Pokemon version 2, JavaScript is disabled, but it's still, you can see that it's still working. See, it's disabled, and here it's asking me to enable JavaScript. So why is it so? Because this version 2 Pokemon, yes, I'm getting it from this public API, but I'm using it inside this loader function, which is a server-side code inside Remix, and this doesn't compile in the browser, for browser. This is inside this server of this Remix. And I'm returning the data loader, and to get this data from the loader, you would use this hook, this use loader data from Remix. And that's how you consume any data coming from your server, and then use this use loader Pokemon. And that's why it's working even though we disabled the JavaScript, right? Let's put it back again. So another one here would be the heroes. So there's a delay, as you can see. Let's check out the heroes. So we're using, again, the loader function here. What's good about here is if you have something to do or like filtering, it's better to do it here inside this loader function, inside your in server side, rather than doing this filter inside this mapping inside your browser, because this is not going to be performant if I do the filter here. So normally this is very advisable to do your modification of your data inside this loader function. And now we're getting it here. Use loader data, heroes, and then mapping it. Very easy. As you can see, it's mostly loader function, right, in Remix. And as you can see here, this server code which does not get bundled in your application. So what if you have dynamic routes and you want to get or to read that dynamic that URL parameter? So going here inside the loader, there's this this object, these params that you can use. See here, we destructured it, and environment is just a validation. This is not part of Remix, by the way. And yeah, that's how you get it. Params that hero IDs, the name same as here, and that's how you get this dynamic route inside the Remix. And same thing here. You're getting it from another API, let's say the ID, checking the ID, sending HTTP requests to another API, response data, and now you can use that single object of hero and then use it inside your template. For the last demo here, to-dos, which requires forms. And so yeah, so how do you write forms inside Remix? This is what they're aiming you to use and to learn more about web standards in Remix. To-dos, as you can see here, let's start with loader and an ORM Prisma. Just ignore this for tests. I'm not using this, by the way, so you just ignore this. And I want you to focus here in action, because this is how you mutate the data. And in the beginning, in the template, let's go to the form, method pose. We have this input, right? Title, type, ref to title, ref, required. Button here, submit. And this is what's valuable here, or what you need to know in the button. There's no on click, as you can see. It has type submit, so you know the typical web standard type submit. And the action here could be anything. It doesn't have to be with underscore. It's just for me to know that I can easily that this is the action that I'm using here. Checking it out. And you would be using the form data. This is from the browser, by the way. Form data dot get, and then the name that you put there, action, right, in the button. And the action has two purposes: saving and deleting. And we will check which one would be for creating or for deleting, so we can do necessary business logic. For example, this one, action, this is for the create. And another action, if this action is equal to delete, you have to do this, right? And let me show you that delete button before I do the demo. For, again, action, name action, value, create, this is where it's coming. And for the delete, this is kind of weird, right? If you're used to create React app and you have these lots of functions. Look at here. I'm deleting something, but I'm using form. Totally different. And Again, I don't have any functions here. I'm just relying on the action name and the value that I'm passing there. Delete, this could be anything also, so that when you're doing the switch or if else here, it's up to you. And you can, this is not, a clean code, by the way. You can make this in a, you can write this a better way. So switch action, if it's create, do this to do create data, delete, get the ID, of course. We need the ID. I need to know the ID. Here's the ID, and then delete using the ORM. Have you noticed something? Let's delete this, delete, 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 delete. I'm gonna show you, oops. Well, anyway, I don't have to show you. I can just show you and you know what's happening here. You don't have to get the index and then splice one, right? Yes. Yeah, exactly. Oh, this is this inside of uh, this action you're talking about. Oh, this is an ORM. So question is how to distinguish whether this runs in the browser and this runs in the server side. So for example, here in this switch action, right, we're returning this await and delete, and this should return a response from your ORM or from the server. And if this returns you a successful um, invoking of this function, and it will trigger and so Remix will constantly revalidate the data here inside here. So you don't have to pick this specific object and remove it in the client side, in the client code, because Remix constantly revalidate whenever you do the action. For example, pressing this, Remix will revalidate the data if the client code, if your state matches or in sync with the server-side code data. So it always keep this matching. So you don't have to, get the index of that object and then splice it or do the filter and just to remove specific object from the list. So that's what's happening here. Even here, you don't have to push this state, this data, inside this list, because every time you hit the create, Remix will revalidate again if your client side is in sync with what's the data in the server side. So as you can see here, I'm just return triggering the ORM, adding this data inside the ORM, and there's no you don't have to do this like this, like something like that, and then getting the list, which is it's part of it. So, nope, we don't have this local state here, as you can see. You don't have to, let's say, to-dos. You don't have to do that, right? Just to trigger the reconciliation in React. So nothing's like that. Or just, if you have Emer, you don't have to like mutate it directly, because you're not mutating anything here. Remix revalidate the browser with in sync if it's in sync with the server. So there's no pushing or spread array operator that you have to do. It automatically do this for you. So the beauty about this is you don't need state management library. You don't need Redux. You don't need MobX. You don't need Sustand or React Query, because every time you hit this action, Remix revalidate it for you. So, you know, forget about state management because your data is always in sync with this using Remix. So, and revert. So, yeah. So that's all I can demo here in Remix, which is this part is very important for you to be aware. Yes. How do you test? Um, so question is, how do you test the server-side code? Hmm. Okay, so question is, how do you test component if it's, if this is, for example, a template is coming from client-side code? Hmm. Okay, so how do you test form? Uh, you can use different libraries. For example, Vit or Vitess. So if I were, let's say, a team lead, I would I would test my function. I would create functions inside this. Hold on, where's it? I would create functions. I would separate this into these small functions, and test that using whatever you want to use. For the component testing it, I don't normally test component. I would use this end-to-end testing, just to feel or see. This is just self-preference. I prefer end-to-end testing and not component testing. Yeah, end-to-end testing using whatever you want to use, Test Cafe or Cypress, and assert your component, whether you still have this state or whatever you want to assert, how many objects inside the list, or or what how many cards, or how many, whatever you want to do. Um, yeah, but this is, you're not limited to anything here, to to what to use or how to test your application. You can just test a function, or you can test how your component renders, and compare screenshots from different tests. So, yep, almost nearing here. So, yeah, you can grab the repo here, and docs is remix run docs at /env v1, and yeah, so become open source not so long, this remix, and but it already has this very active community collaborating and creating projects following the web standards. And recently, Remix has been acquired by Shopify. If you're not, if you've heard it, so Remix will not be will be will be used in more than 2 million e-commerce sites across the globe under Shopify. And yeah, reason. Here's the reason. I just grabbed the reason why Shopify picked Remix. So Remix will tackle challenges that developers building on Hydrogen. Hydrogen, by the way, is a meta framework that Shopify created, and they have encountered around problems around data loading. I mean, yeah, building data loading, routing, and error handling, which is in Remix. So one of the biggest bets of Shopify they made with Hadrian was the RSC, or React Server Component, and they said that while they believe in the technology in the long term, moving to Remix data loading pattern instead of this RSC will lead to faster performance and simpler developer experience. And now you can say that Remix has a big company that is backing it up while Remix stays open source. And you can read more about Remix and versus Next in this Remix Run blog. And announcement from Shopify Engineering that Remix is joining Shopify and the reason behind they pick Remix and not other meta frameworks. So that's a big plus for Remix. And if you'll be using Remix, you know that in long run, um, especially if it's e-commerce, you'll be benefiting from this big company maintaining this open source project and backing it up. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. If you need to know more, you can ask me questions later, about React, state management, and whatever in Next.js and Remix. So yeah, thank you, and hope you learned something today.